Here we go, episode 44 of the Hibs Ramble. I'm back this week, Craig, and I'm joined by Shaun. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad. Sporting probably my favourite Hibernian top of all time, just for what it represents. It's even got the embroidery on it and everything, man. That's to be expected from one of the finest kit collectors in the EH postcode.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So big week for Hibs last week. Obviously going into the top six, we got a victory over St Mirren, went up to Pittodrie, and I think a lot of people, based on how Aberdeen have been the last few weeks, obviously save the result against Rangers, they've sort of, ever since we scudded them at Easter Road, they just went on an incredible run. I think was it 7 or 8 games in a row that they won.
7, yeah.
And obviously they had a presentation at Pittodrie on Saturday as well for the Gothenburg. What was it, the Gothenburg Greats, as they call them?
For Gothenburg Greats.
Effectively winning the European version of the League Cup back in 1983, beating some diddy Spanish side, I believe it was. But aye, 0-0, Shaun. But I think if you were to look on the face of it and go, oh, Hibs Aberdeen 0-0, or to be expected, it's probably a bit of a drab affair. But it was far for that. Hibs, like, I don't think it's unfair to say that we probably created more chances against them on Saturday there than we did when we scudded them at Easter Road.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember the last time we had such a dominant performance and not picked up all 3 points. I couldn't think of one. I was rattling my brain all weekend and couldn't think of one. We seemed to create lots and lots of chances very early on as well. I know Lee Johnson likes to start well, and I think we had about 4 or 5 really half decent chances, maybe 1 or 2 glaring chances in the first 25-30 minutes. And I still stand by the fact I don't think Aberdeen are that great a side at all. They've obviously, as you mentioned, since we pumped them 6-0, they've went on this run, and the state of the league overall at the moment just shows that if you can put a run like that together, you can end up where they've ended up. So fair play to them. It's pretty much guaranteed third for them as well, I think. And we made them look very, very, very average. Like, not even like a top 6 side. Like, we were just battering them the whole game. I don't think they really had a clear enough chance until, I think it was maybe the 44th minute, where they worked on Smart for a corner and it went just over the bar. Their 2 strikers never tested us all game. You wouldn't even think they were both playing. They both ended up coming off as well. So very dominant performance from us. And like I said, I would have taken a point before the game. I think the most important thing from my perspective is the fact that I think a lot of the fans now have maybe just got a little bit extra belief in what Johnson's trying to do. It's clear the players have thought that for a fair while now, considering some of the performances they've been able to put in. But I think it's good to see that some of the fans are now kind of getting on board with what people like ourselves have thought for a long time.
No, I agree, and I think that I was speaking to somebody about this yesterday, actually, in terms of Aberdeen's run. They found themselves very fortunate to not get Celtic or Rangers in that run, whereas ourselves and Hearts, to an extent, have both played Celtic or Rangers between that, in amongst that sort of run when we picked ourselves up. Obviously, we had the game away at Livingston 4-1, and then we played Rangers the following Wednesday at Easter Road, and then obviously we played Celtic not long after that at Parkhead. Whereas they've been able to play Ross County, Dundee United, Kilmarnock, Motherwell, etc. So I think when the split first came out, if you'd said that Hibs had taken 4 points for the first 2 games, I think a lot of people would have taken that. I think the frustration lies in that it just shows you how quickly it can change in terms of, when Nisbet got that penalty. Well, McCurdy got the penalty, but Nisbet took the penalty. Hearts were 2-1 down. And if we go 1-0 up, that puts us above them.
Yeah.
And puts us right up Aberdeen's arse with them to play Hearts the following Saturday. Whereas, again, I just think they found themselves incredibly fortunate that Hearts have managed to drop points and we didn't manage to take all 3. Because, like you said, it's hard to remember a dominant performance where we didn't pick up the points. But also a dominant performance at Pittodrie, which is notoriously a very, very difficult ground. I know we won there in the COVID season when Doidge scored. But in terms of the way that we set out, Johnson seems pretty much set in this 4-1-4-1/4-3-3 style formation, and you have to think that if Boyle was in there over Cadden, not that I'm saying Cadden's doing anything wrong, but in terms of an attacking output, you would fancy us to be a lot higher than what we are. And I agree with you in terms of Johnson. When you look at it, the three sort of marquee forward players come the close of the window were Nisbet, McGeady and Boyle. We barely got a chance to see Boyle before he got injured. As he got injured, McGeady and Nisbet got fit again. And then a couple of weeks, no long after that, McGeady then himself got injured again. So I don't think many teams would have to contend with so many injuries to so many important players. I know Hearts would probably argue about Halkett and Beningame and all that being out as well.
The thing is, on the Hearts thing, obviously, they have a lot of their key players have been injured, and rightly so. They are very, very important players for them. But in a roundabout way, the benefit that they had is that they improved, not improved their squad, but they grew their squad to a level to deal with that kind of, sustained injury period where they've got key players getting injured because they were in Europe. If Hearts weren't in Europe, they wouldn't have got as many bodies in that they would have had of a certain level of quality. So when Craig Gordon gets injured or Craig Halkett, they've brought in Alexander Clark or that James Hill or the boy that they got for Dundee United the other year or in the summer or whatever, the young boy. Like, they've got a certain level of, don't want to say average quality, but of a decent enough quality to come in and fill the shoes. Whereas Johnson has said all season long that our squad from a ability perspective is too short, and he wants to get rid of ultimately the bang average players, which is obviously what he tried to do in January.
Yeah.
So if anything, that's kind of where it's maybe helped Hearts with their injury crisis, whereas with us, I think we had a bench at one point where we had 5 young players, and then the other 3 or 4 positions were filled up with players that barely ever play for us. So It is a shame that we've not been able to see ultimately our strongest side, our strongest 11, and I don't think we will. By the time the summer comes and then next season comes, we won't see those players play together. And it would have been, I know it's all if buts and maybes, but it would have been really good to see, like, say, either McGeady, Nisbet, Ewan, Boyle, those 3 or 4 all together for a period of time, like what Aberdeen have got, where they've played 7 games in a row and only maybe played the Old Firm at the end of it, and they've had that chance to get in the groove. Because the amount of times this season we looked like we've got in the groove, and then we go and play an Old Firm, or we've got an international break, or a cup break that we're not in, or we go and play Hearts when we're really struggling for form. So it's the fact that we are where we are. Johnson's done a goodish job. Obviously, getting knocked out of the League Cup's not acceptable. Getting knocked out by Hearts and Scottish isn't acceptable. And some of the defeats and drop points that we've had haven't been acceptable. But on the face of it, if you weigh everything up, he's done an okay job, and he's starting to lay what I believe will be very good foundations. And I know we'll come on to it later on with the director of football appointment and stuff, but you can see there's a process there.
Yep.
And we just got to hope that, we continue to get it right. And if we get it right, only good things will happen.
No, and when you talk about foundations, obviously the club confirmed that what we've been screaming for a long time is that Ellie Ewan would be signed permanently, and I think that shows a lot as well, that the project, I hate that word project, but the process that players are buying into, in terms of being able to secure Ewan without a protracted summer of like Canberra and McLaren when they were really successful on loan. Will they, won't they, will they, won't they? The club have acted sharp to get that deal over the line. And I suppose that I know that chances are, it's highly, highly likely that Nisbet will probably go in the summer. But you never know, dependent on, how the end of the season plays out. We might go, we've still got 9 points to play for. It's not out with the realms of possibility that we could get it. Historically, our results against the Old Firm in the top 6 aren't the worst.
And they're certainly
obviously
better than the other teams that are in the top 6 at the moment.
Yeah, and also the fact that we've got them both at home. You know, you seen Celtic on Saturday there, they were miles off it. Absolutely miles off it. And then Rangers are going to produce it's the same as when we said about, you know, taking the form against Hearts into St Johnstone or whatever. Rangers are going to take that level of intensity and aggression into a game against us. So, you know, it does set up an exciting end to the season. Something that, you know, back in January there was folk putting money on Hibs to finish in the playoffs.
I said the exact same thing last week.
That just shows you. I know that you and Mark had a really good discussion about McCurdy last week in terms of the whole famous 5 scenario and all that. That instance with him just really summed up his Hibs career, I think, because it was flying in until, and it was weird because I spotted it at the time. I was sitting watching it with Emma, and I was like, "That's a handball." And I thought it was weird that they took. I was like, "Sure." I was like, "Have I missed?" Like, and they didn't. You know, and I think Aberdeen actually got the goal kick off it as well. Hibs weren't getting a corner.
So I think so.
So the referees just completely missed it. I mean, for once, it was nice to be on the receiving end of one of these VAR calls.
That's what VAR's been brought in for, decisions like that, where it's completely been missed, clear and obvious error. If it doesn't hit the boy's hand, it's going in. Like, there's not. I know there's 3 defenders on the line, and the goalkeeper's like down on his knees. There's not a chance it's getting saved, and it's only going one way, and it's burst in the back of the net.
I think the argument to say that VAR still didn't work properly was that it wasn't a red card because he's denied the goal. Like, it's not as if it's been a cross and his arm's in the air. Do you know what I mean? The ball's going in.
Yeah.
So, but I think it just summed up our day. You know, we hit the woodwork 4 times, and as soon as I seen Nisbet pick up the ball, I just knew, like, as good as Nisbet is, he's a hopeless penalty taker.
He's an instinctive striker for me.
It's weird, right? Because I only thought about it after he took the penalty, and that I have never seen Nisbet lace a shot.
Yeah.
And his technique doesn't lend to hitting the ball square on. Do you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't, like, you know, your foot angled like that with the laces and powering through it. He's more, you know, angling his body, opening his body up and placing it, which is a great technique because obviously he scored a lot of goals doing it. But I just, in a situation like that, you know, when a high pressure penalty, the last time he took a high pressure penalty was against Hearts at Hampden, and he scalped the bar.
And you could argue we would have had a chance of winning the cup that year as well.
Yeah, and just to have the 3 points almost snatched out of our own hands through our own doing, is really disappointing. I mean, I don't know. I thought the script would have been written for McCurdy to take it, especially given that he won it, and that would have been the perfect chance to sort of blow everything away.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know how the penalty taking situation works at Hibs. I know that Martin Boyle is normally the penalty taker. Since he's been injured, I can't think of too many that we've had since then.
Just Josh Campbell, isn't it? Aberdeen, but that was to get a hat trick, and he'd never taken one before.
That's so the only reason.
And then he obviously
Nisbet was on at that point as well. Nisbet was on, so you know he then looks like a bit of a prick if he doesn't give it to Josh Campbell because he's on a hat trick.
Yeah.
If Kevin Nisbet, and I'm not digging him out as a person or anything at all, but he does kind of seem like that type of guy that he's like I want it. Like, you know, I'm not saying he would throw a hissy fit or a tantrum, but if he doesn't get his own way, he's not a happy guy. Very similar to why I'm in a way kind of surprised that he's came back since that fall, like since his move fell through and he's performed the way that he has.
Yeah,
he wasn't in himself. If he didn't feel like, right, I need to move in the summer, I want to move, I'm trying to impress people here. If he knew that kind of wasn't an option on the table, I do think that he might have actually given it to someone else. And I said last week that my concern is that Nisbet in situations might
selfish.
start to get a little bit selfish.
Yeah.
Whether it be, in this instance, taking a penalty, or he had a good shot last week, which he should have cut back, and then we would have got another goal. Instances like that, where sometimes I feel like he maybe takes the wrong option to try and benefit himself rather than the team.
He's done it a couple of times against Hearts at Easter Road as well.
Yeah, and at the weekend there, that's a prime example where he's out to impress everybody else and get the best for himself, and maybe not necessarily the team. And listen, he might be the designated penalty taker, and if he is, then I'll keep my mouth shut based on everything that I've literally just said. But
yeah,
I'm surprised. I think Ewan maybe tried to have a word with him at one point and maybe wanted it because they looked like they had a wee handshake, and Ellie Ewan gave him a wee high five, like a good luck kind of thing. So it's good that it didn't kind of come between anyone.
mm-hmm.
But I agree, it would have been kind of written in the stars for McCurdy to come on after everything that's happened. He's won the penalty, he takes the penalty, scores it. We see the celebration. We're then right up Aberdeen's arse, and we go on to have a successful end to the season.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's 2 points dropped. I hope it doesn't take a lot out of the players, kind of putting in that kind of level of performance and not getting the 3 points. And I obviously hope it doesn't take a lot out of Kevin Nisbet and put his head down, because I know he had other stuff going on at the time when he took the other pressure penalty against Hearts. But after that penalty against Hearts, his form dropped as well. Yes, I know he had other things going on, but after that penalty miss in such a big game, his form then dropped and he'd looked half the player, and I don't want that to happen in the next 3 games as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there is a degree of, Nisbet's your de facto number 9. If I'm a sort of traditionalist in that I want my striker taking penalties.
Yeah.
It used to rile me when you see centre halves walking up, or centre midfielders, or the captain walking up and taking it. But then in that instance, knowing Nisbet's record with penalties,
yeah,
I don't know, Joe Newell takes every other set piece, so why not take them as well? Will Fish would. I think I remember watching, was it maybe the Euros, and Harry Maguire took the best penalty, one of the best penalties I've ever seen. He literally just laced it in the top corner.
Yeah.
But it is, like you say, it is very much 2 points dropped. I suppose another contentious decision during the game was Josh Campbell,
which again went our way.
Which was sort of a ball broke in the middle of the park, and Josh's went for it quite high, feet high. Scales has sort of maybe ducked down a wee bit, and there's been a collision. I don't think there was anything too serious that came of it. But I did feel at the time that we were lucky to remain with 11 men on the park. But then when you watch it on the club TV, they also show the angle that the referee's getting to see. So when the ref, if the VAR are monitoring it,
you see the show angle.
Yeah, like it's split screens. And the only thing I believe that saved Josh was that you can just see the whole time he looks at the ball.
That's the only reason I thought the exact same. But
there's not any moment where he takes his eye off. The only time he takes his eye off the ball is when he realises that Scales is there.
He tries to pull out.
And it's almost like I need
to
pull out of this.
The only thing for me on that is, and I'm not saying because this happened it should have happened kind of thing, and I know the Aberdeen players Aberdeen fans have used that, but when you compare some of the other decisions that have went against clubs, especially in recent weeks, whether they've went to the appeal process or not and been successful, the standard of decision making in the last couple of months has been really, really poor. Now, I'm not saying because of that it should have then happened.
Yeah,
I'm actually quite surprised that it didn't happen because of what's happened the last couple of months. But
even when you look at the Haran red card on Saturday, if you take those 2 challenges at pure face value,
I know which
you
one.
Went to a random person and went, right, what one was the red and what one was the yellow?
Yeah.
I would wager a lot of people would have said Campbell's was the red and Haran's was the yellow.
Yeah, but I agree with you that the reason that he got saved is literally he's not taking his eyes off the ball, and when he does, he's then already pulling out.
Yeah.
I don't know how much connection is actually made with Scales' head. If there was a lot, I would imagine that would have came into it as well. But yeah, I was very, very surprised that there wasn't a red card given.
Yeah, I suppose one positive to take from Saturday, and this is just me, you might agree or you might disagree, but it was actually, I know the result kind of takes the shine off it a bit, but for me, I actually enjoyed watching it.
No,
You
I
know,
know, I
it
know,
was it
I
was one
get
of
that.
those ones where I kind of, after full time, it was one of those ones where I was like, Aberdeen never tickles my fancy, never has, never will. But that was one of them where I felt like if I'd have went, I would have really enjoyed it because I definitely enjoyed watching it
Don't get me
in
wrong.
the house.
After it, I was in a right mood after it, but that's because of how it ended and the fact that we were so dominant
Yeah,
and that we should have been coming away with 3 points. So regardless of whether I was at Pittodrie or not, I still would have felt the same. But actually watching the game, if you told me that we were going to go away to Aberdeen, dominate, and I was going to enjoy watching it regardless of the result, like I wouldn't have expected that at all. I would have expected it to be a slugfest, that we would have struggled, we would have been on the back foot, especially based on Aberdeen's form. But for us to go to Pittodrie and be as dominant, create 5-6 chances in the first half, limit Aberdeen to 2 chances the whole 90 minutes, hit the woodwork 3-4 times, and then get a penalty, regardless of how that then came about or what happened after there's certainly a lot of positives to take, and I did enjoy watching it at the time, but not as much the last maybe 10 minutes or so, and I certainly was in a right mood after it.
no, you wouldn't be a Hibs fan if you weren't in a mood, Shaun, would you?
Yeah,
We're not supposed to be happy. We're supposed to be miserable.
yeah,
So I mean, it does set up for an exciting end to the season. Obviously, we've got Rangers up next on Sunday, live on Sky Sports. But before we get to that, obviously there's been a few bits of news coming out for Hibs over the last couple of weeks. Firstly, Brian McDermott, the appointment. I know you and Mark again touched on it briefly, but since then Hibs have released sort of the inside training podcast with him,
yeah.
and it's hard not to be excited, especially when you look at his resume. I know that's a big word for such a wee guy, but when you look at he was talking about when he was at Arsenal. He was out watching. He made it his aim to know every player, and he says that football, when you break it down, isn't really that big. I suppose when you're in it, it won't be. He was away watching players like Saliba at 16, 17 years old. Players like Martinelli were on his radar. Gabriel was on his radar. Odegaard, who kind of everyone knew about anyway, but still, obviously, we're never going to attract that calibre of player. But when you look at his record, it's like Redding, for example, the talent that he managed to find from Ireland. Stephen Hunt, Kevin Doyle in particular, two players who went on to become full, experienced, established internationals, but also Premier League calibre players. And I know that you and Mark also kind of mentioned that it's sort of brings together the amount of experience that we've got in the football department right now is unbelievable. When you look at
It can only set us in good stead.
yeah,
Our manager's got what, 400 games in management. You think of Steve Keane, you think of Brian McDermott, the coaching staff, and everything like that. I can't see us not heading in the right direction. The only way we can't is if we just decide to spunk our money up the wall, which I just can't see us doing.
yeah.
Not this time anyway.
And I suppose you need to give props to the existing recruitment structure because, Will Fish, since he's been given a run in the team, CG Egan Riley, when he came in January, Jimmy Jego as well has more than played his part since he's been in. When you actually look at it on the face of it, the recruitment has only been bogged down really by the signings of like Tavares, who was overhyped and underdelivered, Nohan Kenna as well.
Bojan.
If Bojang as well, if we're getting in, if we can and continue to attract players the level of and potentially hire CJ, Fish, Ellie Yuan, players like being able to get Boyle back, even players like Nisbet, Kukarevich as well. I'm really excited about what the summer holds. I just don't want it to be another summer of here's another signing, here's another signing, here's another signing. I thought it was really interesting to hear McDermott talk about it's people first.
Mm-hmm.
So even if the players Messi-esque talent, if they're a wee fanny, they're not going to play for the club,
Yeah.
which is right. And I do think recently there's became something quite likeable about this Hibs side. Um, and I don't know what it is. I can't quite put my finger on it. But Aye, it's very exciting. Like, you know, the development squad. Obviously we heard the announcement as well that the Ramblers' favourite, one of the Ramblers' favourites, Josh O'Connor, signed a new 2-year deal, as did Murray Aiken, the under-18s league winning captain. Both of them will go out on loan to Airdrie for next season.
I know there's talk of a third one as well out of that whole bunch. But
Well,
obviously we don't
we're
know
hoping it's Ethan Laidlaw. You know, we're massive fans of Ethan, but reading between the lines, it looks like Ethan might see his future elsewhere. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But aye, great moves for them, Shaun. Especially, you never know. Airdrie are in a right chance of going up to the championship as well after they absolutely fucking demolished Falkirk, which gives me, I must say, absolutely no end of pleasure seeing that mob get absolutely gutted.
Yeah, I like the fact that Airdrie are kind of happy to stick their neck on the line and bring these players in now as well. Regardless, they'll obviously maybe fancy their chances of going up as well. So, listen, if Murray Aitken and Josh O'Connor in League One, I have absolutely no doubt that they would smash it down there. I think the Championship would be a good tester for them, especially in an Airdrie side. Airdrie have had Murray Johnson on loan twice, so they know kind of the calibre of player that they're getting from Hibs.
Josh
You know,
Campbell as well. I'd
no,
completely forgot. Josh was there, I think maybe season before last.
that would have been after the Edinburgh City one, is that right? Or the FC Edinburgh one?
Before it, possibly.
Before.
Yeah.
But my point still stands. Like Airdrie know what they're getting with Hibs. Hibs know what they're getting with Airdrie. So they obviously are excited about putting them out on loan. I know that, you know, the contract situation was with the expectation of getting loans set up. So they're signing it with the expectation of, right, we're going to go and do this. So there's obviously something else in the background about, depending on how well they do, will they get another loan at a higher level, or will they be pushing it to the first team, which will be interesting to see how they're managed from there. And it will be interesting to see if we manage to get, you know, obviously we're surmising that the third one is Ethan. You'd like to think it would be, if there is any further movement on that.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously that's one of the main reasons why Hibs have zero interest in getting involved in this Conference League pish, in the Lowland/Highland League. I know that Steve Keane was on a podcast a few weeks ago and he made reference to it. You know, he was asked, like, why do Hibs not want involved? And he was like, well, we looked at it. You know, it would be stupid not to look at it. But they want to be in a position where if there's a spot in the first team squad, as we've seen this season with Ethan, Josh, Oscar McIntyre, you know, they've all had, apart from Ethan, they've had decent levels of game time. But the B team play at the same time as the first team.
Yeah.
So there would be no way that they'd be able to play, because I think if once they've made X amount of appearances for the first team, they're no longer eligible to play in the B team.
You have to get registered for the B team, and I'm sure there's something in there that dictates about your registration as well. So,
well, Aberdeen released a statement today, I believe, or it might have been last night. They were rumoured to be the fourth Premiership team, and they've said no, and they've kind of broke it down on their website, which is quite good. And they've said that they worked out to have a full first team and a full B team, they would need somewhere in the region of 55 full-time players.
yeah.
So you're talking first team squad of about 20, 22, B team squad of maybe about 16, and then your under 18s and below, because I'd like to imagine that most under 18 sides at our level are full time. So then you're talking about another 18. So it's good that they've actually put it down on paper as to why they're not getting involved.
I think getting involved in it ultimately is going to stifle players' development.
Yeah.
If they're really that good, then the likes of Celtic, Rangers, Hearts are going to try and just get as many bodies at that age of such a good quality, and maybe not being able to guarantee them game time. Whereas if we can have a smaller squad here, get them involved with the first team, or get them loans to Airdrie or FC Edinburgh or anywhere else, you're getting them, not only are you getting them games at a higher level than this pishy Conference League, you know, you're then keeping them involved with the first team on a weekly basis, because if they put them down to like an Airdrie who are, I believe, still part-time, they're still training at Hibs, they're still involved with the club, they're still involved with the setup, they're still involved with the players. So if they do at some point, like, for example, the boys that went away on loan after the European run came to an end, they were still training with Hibs. Now that those seasons have came to an end, they're back in the mixture with the first team again. So
Yeah.
I do believe, and I completely understand why the club have made the decision that they made at the beginning of the season, and I can't see them going back on it, especially not after what Steve Keane said.
No, I agree. And the last bit of news that we've had is today that the Hibernian women have announced that Dean Gibson will be leaving the club at the end of the season to mutual consent. I know that, Shaun, you're a big advocate, not that we're not advocates of women's football, but you've got first-hand experience of working within women's football, so it's something that you're very passionate about. Obviously, from the outside looking in, Hibs were one of the, if you were to look at, Scotland's got the old firm in terms of the men's football. This women's equivalent was Glasgow City and Hibs. I know Glasgow City were extremely dominant, winning the league for 13, 14 years in a row.
Yeah.
But Hibs always seemed to be the team that came out on top in the cups. Whereas, obviously, the old firm caught wind to that and decided to go full time. And obviously, Hearts, I think, what was it recently? One of the first victories over the Hibs ladies' side in a very, very long time.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the Hibs women situation as it stands at the moment, going from being one of the high profile sides to now effectively becoming one of just like a mid-table sort of, not an also ran, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think first of all, the season that they've had this season from a league perspective has been nowhere near the level that us as fans, whether you're interested in the women's side of the game or not, would expect, and that's because of the level of performance and the level of player that we've had as a club in previous seasons. Personally, and this is just my personal opinion, I think the quality, this isn't necessarily a dig at the players at all that are currently at the club or have been at the club in recent years, but it's more so the kind of what's been going on at the background. I know since the Gordons have came in, they've tried to bring the club together and try to make the women's side as full-time as possible without maybe it being full-time by, giving them level of employment elsewhere or covering expenses and things like that. But from the outside looking in and based on what I know, in my personal opinion, the quality has been on a downward spiral for a number of years now, which has been really sad to see. I absolutely loved my time when I was at Hibs and when I was involved. And I met some fantastic people as well. Some of the players that I coached are still in the first team. And I believe rightly so that they should be there because they're quality players. And some of the players that I've been involved in have went on to play for, other clubs, whether it be Celtic or Rangers or whatever as well. And if I compare where Hibs were when I left Hibs and went to Rangers, the stuff that I've heard from a Hibs perspective since then, I know that was many moons ago now, but even then they seem to kind of start going on a downward trajectory from them, whereas Rangers, from a structure perspective, they were putting everything into their women's side of the game because they knew that there was an avenue there to grow and explore the demand, and they've rightly done that, and they've given the women's game a platform. From a paid perspective, they've been able to attract a new level of player, and then Celtic have followed suit as well, and then they're doing it, and now you've obviously got the three sides fighting at the top of the league. It's very disappointing to see that Hibs are nowhere near that anymore. Fair play to Hearts as well on what they've done. They've closed what was a humongous gap, and they're now above Hibs, and rightly so.
Yeah.
They went God knows how many years without a result against Hibs, and yet, they're now going into games against Hibs expecting to win them, which, is goes a lot to say about what they've done. But I think, to get back to the actual point, I think Hibs do have a long way back to where they need to be. Their level of recruitment and their level of coaching was night and day in comparison to what I think it is now. Like I said, I'm not involved in Hibs anymore, so I can't speak too much on it, but what they were doing then in comparison to what they're doing now is night and day in comparison to the quality player they were able to attract. And listen, there's going to be a factor of that comes into it because of the full-time aspect of it. Regardless of how good a player you are, you want to play at your highest level and get paid for it. And so I can understand why Hibs at the moment can't maybe attract the level of player that they certainly used to when them and City were competing. But then they need to get the youth side of it in order as well, and maybe get more of a structure back to that, to then be able to at least attract a certain level of player. There was a point where people would come to Hibs because they knew that if they performed well and they were good enough, they'd get a chance in the first team, which is why over the last 5 years, a lot of players have came through the youth and then went into the Hibs ladies first team and then got a move down south or to a Celtic or a Rangers. So they just need to kind of get themselves back in order from the structure perspective underneath the first team, instead of maybe just concentrating on a 6-month deal here, a year deal here for a player who ultimately is then going to leave, and just use it as a stepping stone.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think, like you say, looking for the outside in, as I profess to have not a great knowledge of the inner workings of the women's game, but it seemed to be like there was a sort of boom maybe around about 4 years ago, especially when Man United decided to launch a full-time team. I think there was 2 or 3 players for Hibs that went down there, and then when Rangers obviously went full-time, was Jenna Fife, the goalie, went there, Lizzie Arnott ended up there, Amy Gallagher at Celtic. All these players that played, I think Claire Elmsley maybe played for Hibs at one point. Obviously, Kim Little played for Hibs at one point as well. Leanne Crichton, all the sort of big names in women's football have all played for Hibs at some point. And it does seem that Hibs have just stood still. I know it's going to be hard to keep up with Celtic and Rangers in terms of, as soon as they decided to bring it in-house, to try and keep up with the finances involved with them is going to be difficult. But the fact that, twice this season they broke the record for the highest, or 2 seasons in a row, the highest attended women's game in Scotland until Celtic played Glasgow City last week, shows there is the appetite there, especially from a Hibs perspective.
Yeah, I think they were just, at one point, they were kind of limited as a women's side and what they could do in regards to, paying players or paying expenses. And
they kind of sold the dream, whereas they don't need to sell the dream anymore because the dream can be got at 4, 5, 6 different avenues.
The structure just wasn't there, in comparison to what Celtic and Rangers now have. And I think back then, when the boom that you mentioned, they were still finding it quite difficult as a club. Right, where are we going to train? Are we going to train at
East Mains or Public Park or whatever?
Down where the uni train. It was then trying to find a structure for them, and I know, or I would like to think, they're now on an upwards trajectory in regards to sorting things behind the women's team in regards to the structure and general manager and scouting and youth. I would like to think that that's on the agenda to improve and kind of take forward. But I guess time will tell, and I don't think it'll be a quick fix, if I'm being honest either.
Well, it was interesting. That was another subject that Brian McDermott spoke about, and actually spoke quite passionately about it, because he was talking about how he used to get sort of 40, 50 girls going to, I think he set up a team in Woking, maybe, or Slough, where he was, back in like the early 2000s. And it does seem that he's something that, that's something that he's quite passionate about as well. And I do think that if there's something operating under the Hibs name, whether it's the women's football, men's football, youth football, I think we want it to be successful. Just because it's not the men's first team doesn't mean it doesn't deserve a good level of attention. Of course, the main driver of the football club is the men's first team, so that should always be, for me, the focus. But there shouldn't be an eye taken off the ball elsewhere because of that. And I think that McDermott will be good in that regards as well. Talking of McDermott, obviously, like we spoke about, Johnson's now got a wealth of experience at his fingertips, whether it be those above him, those alongside him, or those underneath him. What do you think the support's perception of Johnson is now? And the only reason I ask that is that I was having a look at .net over the weekend, which I know is not a great barometer for judging opinions, but the amount of people that have flipped from get him out, get him gone. I'll admit, I know we're massive fans of Lee Johnson, and I've reacted to the Derby defeat in the Cup by saying get him out. Obviously completely reactionary. But there seems to be a lot of people that were quite long-term, nah, he's not for me, that are now buying into him. Is there anything that you can particularly drill that down to that's not just purely results-based or performance-based? Or
Well, I don't think he's changed the way that he spoke in the media or anything like that. I don't know if it's just maybe over time people have started to buy into what he's saying instead of actually just not wanting to listen to him. I think he's not really changed the way that he conducts himself in interviews, and loads of people go on about how he seems to like to talk to the camera and things like that. At the end of the day, as the manager of the club, he's the face of the club. So whenever there's an event going on, he's going to be there, and it's just part of his duties.
Yeah.
I think maybe people have just started to maybe actually pay attention to what he's trying to say, and then because they've started to actually listen to it, they're then maybe trying to take on board, right, okay, what's going on at the club in a little bit more detail. And then I think the whole Ron Gordon situation has certainly helped bring the club a lot closer together.
Yeah.
Obviously, the result at the time when we played Livy, which was a fantastic performance, fantastic win, and then we went into the Rangers game. Obviously, the performance and the result was diabolical there, but there wasn't anything after that where people were calling for his head, or very similar to the Hearts defeats, the months prior. There seems to be a little bit of a coming together since the passing the Ron Gordon, which is unfortunate that has happened in the first place, but it's unfortunate that it's taken something like that for the vast majority of the support to maybe flip their opinion or maybe try and buy into the club is a little bit more. I think people have maybe seen that. I think a lot of people have been detached from the club for some time now, especially with the Shaun Maloney incident and prior to Jack Ross being sacked. And I think the way that the club have handled themselves since the appointment of Lee Johnson, and they've handled the whole Ron Gordon situation, and then the January transfer window, I think people that have maybe washed their hands with the club have maybe just had their eyes opened a little bit.
Yeah.
Have maybe been able to have a look at the club and maybe understand that the core values of the club are actually still there in regards to the togetherness, the family side of it. And I think maybe that is what has brought a lot of people back on board, maybe not necessarily with Lee Johnson, but with the club. And because they're maybe now back on board with the club aspect of it, they've actually started to open their ears a little bit and listen to what Lee Johnson's saying. He speaks very, very well, and certainly paints a good picture. And I think the appointment of Steve Keane and now Brian McDermott, although Hibs fans weren't happy that he didn't have any Scottish game experience, which I'm not going to talk about, I think overall people are maybe starting to understand that, right, okay, maybe the club is in a good place, it is in a good direction, and we're on the up.
Yeah, and I do think that, if you think back to when we spoke to Lee and Ben, if you want to go back and listen to that, off the top of my head, the episode number, I can't remember it, but we got a good 40-45 minutes with Lee and Ben, and the dynamic between them works well, I think. And a lot of people, when Steve Keane got appointed, there was a lot of mumping and moaning about, why are we bringing him in? He's done this, he's a failure, he's failed here, failed there. And now everybody's clamouring for every one of these players to get in the first team.
And people were all also wanting him to get the manager's job and sack Lee Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's one of them. I do think that we have been fans of Lee Johnson for a long time, but we're not deluded in the aspect that if we feel like there should be something said, or there's an area that we feel that the club are being let down or the manager's letting himself down, then we're more than happy to call that out. But I just think a lot of us have got sick and tired of the firefighting. As soon as there's a bad run of results, sack him, get someone else in, sack him. Like, we're not going to get anywhere by doing that. And I mean, it just goes to show, I seen it on Twitter earlier on, a year ago today was James Scott scoring a hat-trick against St Johnstone. Now, if you compare where we were at full time compared to where we are now, we're in the top 6 for a start, but it doesn't feel as if we're a laughing stock either. Yeah. It does feel as if, like you said, it maybe has taken Ron's passing to make it happen. But
I know it's a terrible thing to say, but when we're not
understand
what
you're meaning
about performance of the team, and we're not talking about results, if you're taking that away, that is literally, in my opinion, the only thing that you can maybe look at as a big factor that would make people change their mind and change their opinion on maybe
But
the
then it's
value of the
also,
club.
that could also be an inner drive from the club as well to not let Ron's time spent at the club be in vain.
Correct.
And also for Ian and Kit and the Gordon family to, because there's been a lot of talk about fulfilling Ron's dream and fulfilling Ron's legacy. But that might have been Ian's dream at the start. It might have been Kit's dream at the start also. So while it's about fulfilling what Ron would have wanted, it's also about carrying on what Ian and Kit want as well. So
and it's massive that there be from that perspective, from the Gordon's family, that this early. I know it appears early because a normal season would have been finished by now, but because of the World Cup, we're still going. We're in the middle of May and we've already secured what we potentially could be our player of the year from this season, or one of our players of the season. We've secured them on a 3-year deal. So going back to your point earlier on, they're willing to take that, not a sacrifice, but they're willing to take that plunge into the market, fork out potentially 500 grand or so there or thereabouts, however you want to look at it, and start to build. We're getting, Brian McDermott in early doors. We've taken our time over the appointment, so clearly the club as a whole think that's the right appointment. We've spoken the last couple of weeks about trying to secure these loans for another year or try and get them on a permanent. And if we continue to attract, similar to what you were saying earlier on, players of that ilk or better, because we are a very attractive club on the face of it, we're only going to go in the right direction with someone with Lee Johnson's experience in the manager's seat, someone with Brian McDermott's experience at Director of Football, overseeing the appointment of players and coaching staff and this, that, and the other, and then someone like Steve Keane in charge of the academy. So, like I said earlier on, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I do certainly think that we're on the up, and that opinion of mine will remain the same even if we get beaten the next 3 games, which I know we're obviously going to talk about in a sec.
Yeah.
But I just feel like the right things are there. I know the Gordon family, sorry, and Ron wanted to get the structure of the club set first. In regards to the commercial side of it, that has now happened. Now we're doing the structure of the club from behind it, from a footballing sense. Then we're going to concentrate on the pitch, and then slowly but surely everything's going to come together. And like I said, as long as we do the right things and don't, spunk any money up the wall, and the right decisions are made, then we'll be in a good position.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we'll move on to Sunday, massive game, obviously in front of the Sky cameras. We welcome the second incarnation of Rangers Football Club to Easter Road.
On a good date as well, might I add. I feel like it'll be a good vibe of it.
Yes, 21st of May, which is a date that is forever etched in our memories. We're long overdue a result against them at Easter Road, are we now?
Yeah, we are. And I think, do you know what, this might be the cynical aspect of me, but I think the fact that it's on that date as well will actually get a better level of support.
Yeah.
I know it's on a Sunday. I'm hoping that it's good weather as well. Sunday, sunshine on Easter Road, or on Leith, so to speak. On that day, 21st of May, there's going to be loads of montages online in the build-up to the game. It's going to have a big, massive game feel to it. I know playing Rangers is a big game for us anyway, but I think just with everything else surrounding it, I think it's just going to feel like a little bit of a bigger game than normal, especially with the point that we got the weekend. If we're able to take something off the Old Firm, you touched on it earlier, Rangers are not going to be up to it as if they were against Celtic. Yes, they don't like playing us either, and yes, there's this little bit of a bite in our games against Rangers, but I've said it for a couple of weeks, I do fancy us to take something off the Old Firm. I like the way that our split fixtures have laid out, that we're playing both of them at home, and I do fancy us to take something off them, that's for sure.
No, I agree. It's hard to believe, 7 years. 7 years since that day. It's mentally. Can still remember everything. I was you for the day. I was teetotal. I never touched a drop. And
You
I'm
must have been glad.
No, I was, because I remember
Everything.
everything. Absolutely everything. I agree with you, Shaun. It's one of them where we are due a result against them, and I think the fact that we've got something to play for and they don't will help us. It won't have the 5-5 feeling to it, like that day where we had to
Yeah.
come out the trap. But I do think that there will be an element of, the fact that Hearts and Aberdeen will have played on the Saturday, so we kind of know, if there's a draw there, we know that we can go a point, maybe a point, 2 points ahead of Hearts,
Yeah.
not a point ahead of Hearts, then also still just be 4 points behind Aberdeen with 2 games still to play. And Aberdeen's 2 games will be what, St Mirren and Rangers?
Yeah, and
St Mirren's
St
Mirren and Celtic, sorry.
And because of the result that St Mirren got at the weekend, it's albeit just a point, they're still going to be going all out to try and get fifth ultimately because they'll still
want to try and catch us.
Yep.
Exactly. No, so you want to do a prediction?
3-2 Hibs.
3-2 Hibs, aye. Of course it has to be. Couldn't be any other way.
Surely.
And then, so what we'll do is we're going to touch on all the games, but we'll wait until next week where we can kind of review the Rangers game and then look ahead to Celtic and Hearts for what will be the end of the season. It's been a very, very good first year for the Ramble. And like you say, hopefully sunshine on Leith, sunshine over the H7 on Sunday would be a good way to start the final week of the season. So our questions for this week.
Now it's time to answer the Hibs Ramble listener questions.
We'll start off with our standard every single week for John. John says, pointless it feels. What's for dinner or something? I don't know. Fuck off, Hibs. So I've already had my dinner. Don't know about you.
Same.
But I had leftover Chinese. And it was unbelievable.
What was the Chinese?
Oh, it was just, I had, so yesterday there's a new Chinese opened in Gorgie. So we got chicken fried rice, chips, curry sauce, salt and pepper chips, and salt and pepper chicken.
Nice. Solid.
And I just mixed it onto the one.
Tremendous. Love that.
Had
Great.
3/4 of it last night and stopped myself eating the last quarter because I'm a massive fan of leftover Chinese.
Certainly a better Chinese order than John's anyway, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I've already had my dinner and I had a prawn risotto. Prawn risotto. Very good. Very good.
Surprised it wasn't pasta.
I've got a pasta dish for tomorrow.
Jeff Ashton says, whole team played well, but standouts were Ewan and CJ for different reasons. Don't disagree with that at all. Just on that, just a quick one, Shaun. Obviously, Lee Johnson said in his post-match interview on Saturday that he's looking to get all the loan players signed up again. We'd be in a great position if we could get CJ and Will Fish back for next year.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And also, how shite is that ground? Couldn't see the far corner on our side of the pitch. One of the reasons why also I don't go to Aberdeen, because it's an absolute fucking hole of a ground. Gav Dick, frustrating today. Should had all 3 points. Thoughts on Henderson's performance? Personally, thought he did well. I can't remember Henderson really being in the game much.
But you also can't remember him really doing anything wrong. Yeah,
so it's good. He's had a Jimmy Jeggo performance. When you don't notice him, he's played well.
He had a few good passages he played, set up Joe Neal for his chance that he dragged wide. A couple of good through balls down the right hand side to Cadden and into Ewan as well. Didn't really put a foot wrong. Didn't really slow down the tempo of the game. I don't think there was any Hibs player on the park that had a bad game.
No, I thought they all
overall. Yeah. Their overall performance and Henderson's included in that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sketchers boy Liam Riley says we are the third best team. Just need 2 chances. I'm assuming he means just need to finish chances. #horny Hibs. Harvey Scott's asked, John McIntosh has already asked what's for dinner, so I'll ask, is it just the Hibs players who can't finish theirs? Based on Saturday, aye.
That's been a reoccurring theme this season, though. When we get into the final third, we don't really seem to quite take our chances every time. And we've been saying for months that at some point it's going to click, and it's clicked maybe twice this season. It clicked at Livy where we scored 4. It clicked against Aberdeen at home where we scored 6. So we just don't do it enough. We definitely dominate the opponent's attacking final third, and we just don't seem to be able to put the ball in the back of the net enough, which is surprising considering the quality that we have in the front three.
Yep, no, I agree. Next one is from, I don't know if it's Disco L76 or Discall76. Either way, the way it panned out, panned PAND, come on, fuck me. Absolutely gutted not to take all 3 points, compounded by the Gunts scoring the last minute equaliser. Yeah, sort of covered that earlier. Ryan?
I think that took us a lot out of the support aspect of it, but from a player's perspective, Johnson have them fired up, and based on their performances as a club, they seem, like I said, buying into what he's doing and continually doing it. And I think the fact that we're playing no Firm in the next two means that we're maybe not going to get like a 45-minute performance like we did against St Mirren. I think it was a 90-minute performance. So
Ryan Gibson's asking, should Hibs sign Depot Akinyemi? I'm assuming that's the boy that's banged him in for air this season.
It is.
No. I've not seen anything of him, and no.
Just times that by 2 for me then.
Yeah. And Martin Corrigan has asked, I thought we played well. Would you guys have picked someone else to step up for the pen? And also how were the pies? Sorry, mate, no Premiership this week, given that there was 0 Ramble representation up at Pittodrie. Mark was, I believe, at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
Same Man United. Liam's got his hands full because he can't keep it in his pants. And I don't know about you, Shaun, but I just couldn't be arsed going to Aberdeen. That's not very #horny Hibs of me. However, yeah, at this stage of the season, I've got Alfie's, my laddie's turning 13 next week, so I can't be affording days out at Pittodrie.
I coach on a Saturday and Sunday, so I would have had to pie that off to make any form of transport to get up there in time. And the last time I went up, we were in the hunt for a European spot and we missed a penalty in a 0-0 match.
Yeah, funnily enough, another regular Rambler, Callum Laidlaw, said the same. On his way back, he was like, fuck me, the last time I was in Aberdeen, Hibs drew 0-0 and Jamie McLaren missed a penalty that day.
Yeah.
And then the final question for this week is from Keith Robertson. Has Nisbet taken his last penalty for Hibs? I certainly hope so.
I don't think I will have, if I'm honest. But yeah,
we're not getting a penalty against Rangers or Celtic, and we're not going to get one at Tynecastle. So he definitely has, in my opinion.
I want a McCurdy penalty in the 90th minute at Tyney to secure us 4th and go above them. That's what I want.
I'd want that in front of the Gorgie road end as well. I'd want them to be.
So you'd want it in the first half then?
No, I'd want Hibs to be shooting away from us in the second half.
That obviously wouldn't happen, though, is my point.
For them to be. Which turns out it's actually a machine gun.
Is it?
It's not a bow and arrow.
Yeah,
he made a comment somewhere that he's desperate for folk to see the machine gun celebration.
I want to know the origins of it, if I'm honest.
It's probably something to do with Tottenham, because he hates Tottenham, doesn't he?
He seems like someone that would play GTA or something as well, so maybe something to do with that.
Well, he dresses like he's in GTA. And also as a follow-up, was LJ right to bring off Campbell when he did? On the one hand, didn't want to risk a second yellow and suspension. On the other hand, he probably would have taken the penalty and done a better job than Nisbet, assuming we still got it. You don't know.
I don't think he would have taken the penalty, if I'm honest. I think Campbell came out after he got his hat-trick by scoring the penalty and said that, one, he never wants to take one again, and two, he won't be the designated penalty taker, so I don't think he would have taken it if he was on the pitch.
But he did it. He did it at Celtic Park.
I forgot he took one then, aye.
So he's 2 from 2.
I try and wipe out those games from my memory since we didn't win them. But what was the second point I was going to make? I'm getting taken off. I think that's maybe just game management from Lee Johnson, learning from previous mistakes.
Yeah.
So I thought the exact same when he took him off, and I was glad actually that he took him off. And also when he came off, we didn't lose anything, and we continued the way that we were, which I think is more important.
Yeah, I feel that Josh's form's probably tailed off a wee bit in the last few weeks, but that's no coincidence given that, his sort of tailing off has been with the upturn in form with Jake Doyle-Hayes coming back into the side, who I thought we missed on Saturday.
We've just maybe tweaked the way that we play, and it's maybe just not suited him, which is why he's been on the bench and that as well. So
yeah, no, I agree. Well, we'll wrap up for this week's episode of the Ramble, and we will be back again next Monday to review what is hopefully another successful 21st of May. If not, we can still brag about the original 21st of May. There's no loss. And then we'll be covering the Celtic and Hearts games before we probably lead up to our end of season pod, which will be an absolute barnstormer. I'd put aside maybe 2.5 hours for that. And the first 2 hours and 25 minutes will just be Shaun talking about his thoughts of the season. So
correct.
But as always, keep interacting with us. Shaun keeps putting out cracking stuff on the socials. The Guess the Hibs Player of the Day, by taking excerpts from Wikipedia, their career histories. I was just throwing random names. Probably the more obscure, the better.
They'll definitely get used, don't you worry. I just need to find links. I'm going to try and link players together.
They all played for Hibs. There's a link.
Well, you know what I mean.
But if you don't already, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at the Hibs Ramble. On YouTube, subscribe to us so when the episode goes up, Liam will get this done, seeing as he's going to be up all night anyway.
If you're not following us on Facebook as well, you're going to miss out on lots of 21st of May content as well, because obviously Facebook does not have a limitation about what you can and can't post in regards to photos and videos. So get yourself over to the Ramble Facebook page and you will not be disappointed. Ramble over and out.
Ramble over and out. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.